Imagine a landscape just completely wiped clean. All you can see is gray ash, devoid of life. That was Mount St. Helens, right after the eruption in 1980.
A totally barren slate.
Totally. But then, just a few years later, what starts popping up through that debris? It wasn't the mosses, it wasn't the ferns, it was seed plants.
Yep.
Things like that vibrant pink fireweed, just colonizing that barren ground so fast.
That image, I mean, it really sets the stage for our mission today perfectly. The success of seed plants, we're talking gymnosperms and the flowering angiosperms. It's arguably the greatest evolutionary story in the entire plant kingdom.
They really cracked the code for living on land.
They absolutely did. Last time, we talked about those first steps. But today, we're tracing the evolution of this final, totally dominant lineage. We're going to focus on what allowed them to succeed, where all the early plants sort of stalled out.
Okay, so we're pulling from the foundational biology texts here to really understand the engineering behind that success. What were the specific evolutionary adaptations that unlocked this terrestrial dominance?
Well, it's really a package deal of 5 fundamental innovations. If you get these 5, you pretty much understand why seed plants conquered the world.
Okay, what are they?
First, a massive reduction in the size of the gametophyte. Second, the jump to what we call heterospory. Third is the evolution of the ovule.
Yeah.
Fourth, the invention of pollen. And then finally, the seed itself. And each one of those steps progressively frees the plant from its ancestral dependence on water for reproduction.
All right, let's unpack that, starting with the reduced gametophyte. With mosses, the gametophyte is the big leafy green thing you see.
It's the dominant generation.
Right. With ferns, it's smaller, but it's still a free-living organism. But in seed plants, it basically vanishes. It becomes microscopic. Why is that such a huge leap forward?
It's a profound strategic shift for the plant. The gametophyte, being haploid, it's fragile. By shrinking it down to just a few cells and protecting it inside the moist tissues of the parent sporophyte, the plant gets 2 major benefits. One, it shields those delicate reproductive cells from everything, drying winds, UV radiation, you name it. And 2, it lets the plant pour all of its energy into building the sporophyte, the tree, the flower, which is diploid and much better built for survival.
So it's like a tiny, protected reproductive factory hidden inside this big, tough survival machine.
Exactly.
And this specialization, this resource shift, it kind of necessitates a move to heterospory, doesn't it? You can't have one bisexual gametophyte anymore if it's so specialized.
Precisely. Heterospory just means producing 2 different kinds of spores. You have the megasporangia, which produce megaspores.
Which give rise to the female gametophytes, the eggs.
Right. And then you have the microsporangia, which make microspores, and those develop into the male gametophytes that produce sperm.
Which leads us directly to the ovule and the pollen grain, the 2 big ones. Let's start with the ovule.
The ovule is the female side of the equation. It's a whole package. It has the megasporangium and the megaspore. But the key innovation is this protective layer of sporophyte tissue wrapped around it called the integument.
The integument, that's the armor.
That's the armor. The female gametophyte develops inside this little fortress, produces the egg, and the whole protected unit is what will eventually become the seed after fertilization.
So that protects the egg. But the male counterpart, the pollen grain, that solves the ancient problem of, well, getting around.
And this is the true terrestrial game changer. The pollen grain is the male gametophyte, but it's enclosed in this incredibly tough wall made of sporopollenin.
So it can travel?
It can travel by wind, by animals, the process we call pollination. It completely eliminates the need for liquid water to get sperm to the egg. The sperm is delivered right to the ovule through a little pollen tube.
If the earlier plants were amphibians then, tied to the water, the invention of pollen made seed plants the fully terrestrial reptiles.
That's a great analogy. And all this work, the reduced gametophytes, heterospory, ovules, pollen, it all culminates in the seed.
The ultimate survival structure.
It really is. I mean, compare it to a spore. A spore is just a single cell. A seed is multicellular. You have a full embryo, a little baby sporophyte packaged with its own lunchbox, a food supply, and a tough seed coat.
And that complexity allows for dormancy.
Prolonged dormancy, which is a superpower.
Oh, absolutely. There's that incredible case of the date palm seeds they found near the Dead Sea.
I love this story.
They were over 1,000 years old, some estimate even older, and they were still viable. They grew.
Think about that. They literally waited out more than 10 centuries for the right conditions. A spore just can't do that. It gives the species multiple chances to establish itself.
Okay, so now that we have these mechanics down, let's look at the first group to really put them to use. The gymnosperm.
Right, the naked seeds.
Mm-hmm.
This group includes all the familiar conifers, pines, firs, redwoods. Their seeds are called naked because they aren't enclosed in an ovary. They're just out in the open, usually on the scales of a cone.
And the pine life cycle is the classic example of all 5 adaptations in action. The huge tree is the dominant sporophyte.
And it produces 2 different types of cones. You've got the small, softer pollen cones that produce just massive amounts of pollen that gets carried by the wind,
And then you have the big, woody ovulate cones.
which contain the megasporangia that eventually develop into the seeds.
But the timeline for pines always gets me. With flowering plants, it's fast. Spring blossom, summer fruit. Pines are, they're on geological time.
They really are. It's a marathon. Pollination might happen in the spring, but fertilization itself, that often takes place more than a year later.
A year.
The whole process, from the first appearance of the cone to the dispersal of a mature seed, can take almost 3 years. It's a slow, steady investment in a really well-protected, nutrient-rich seed.
And that strategy really paid off when the global climate changed.
Oh, absolutely. The seedless vascular plants, they love the wet, swampy Carboniferous period. But then during the Permian, the climate dried out.
And the gymnosperms took over.
They did. Their adaptations for aridity and their water-independent reproduction let them dominate the land for the entire Mesozoic era. The age of dinosaurs was the age of gymnosperms.
And it's not just pine trees. There are 4 very distinct phyla of gymnosperms still around today.
That's right. The biggest, of course, is Coniferaita, the conifers, about 600 species. This is where you find the giants, like the sequoia, and the ancients, like the bristlecone pine. Some of those are over 5,000 years old.
Just incredible. But then you have the real survivors, the relic groups.
Exactly, like the Cycadophyta, the cycads. They look a bit like palm trees, but they're not. They're highly endangered. And what's fascinating is that they, and also the Ginkgophyta,
Represented by just one species, Ginkgo biloba.
just the one, both of them still have the ancient trait of flagellated sperm. Even though they don't need water to get the pollen there, the sperm itself can still swim a tiny distance inside the ovule.
It's like a little evolutionary echo. And the ginkgo is such an interesting tree, so tolerant of air pollution.
It is. Then finally you have the Gametophyta. It's a really weird group with 3 very different genera, including the bizarre desert plant Welwitschia.
That thing is wild.
It really is. It shows just how much variation you can get even within that gymnosperm body plan.
So gymnosperms set the stage, but then the angiosperms, the flowering plants, they took over. They're, what, 90% of all plant species today?
At least. And they're all defined by having seeds enclosed in a special chamber that matures into a fruit. The key innovation here is the flower.
Which is essentially a specialized reproductive shoot. It's not a cone. It's an apparatus built for interacting with animals.
A highly efficient one. You've got your sterile parts, the sepals and petals, and then the fertile part.
The stamens and the carpels.
Right. The stamen is the male part. It produces the pollen. But the defining structure of an angiosperm is the carpel. It houses the ovules. It has a sticky stigma up top to catch pollen, a style, and then the ovary at the base. That ovary is the container. That's the whole ball game.
And after fertilization, that ovary wall thickens and matures into what we call the fruit, the ultimate dispersal machine.
Oh, absolutely. Fruits are just ingenious dispersal vehicles. You have fleshy ones like a tomato, dry ones like a hazelnut.
Right.
Wind dispersal gives you maple wings. Water gives you coconuts.
Yeah.
But the most effective strategies use animals. Edible fruits get eaten, and the seeds get deposited far away with a little packet of fertilizer.
Or they just hitch a ride, like burrs.
Exactly. And the reproductive cycle itself is super efficient thanks to a process called double fertilization.
Okay, this is unique to angiosperms.
Totally unique. So the pollen tube delivers 2 sperm. The first sperm does the normal thing,
Yeah.
fertilizes the egg, forms the diploid zygote, which becomes the embryo.
Standard procedure. But the second sperm.
The second sperm fuses with 2 other nuclei in the central cell of the female Gametophyte. This creates a triploid cell 3N. And that triploid cell develops into the endosperm. That's the food supply. And the hypothesis is that this is an efficiency mechanism. The plant only invests energy in making that rich food supply if it knows the egg has been successfully fertilized. No wasted resources.
It's so clever. No wonder they took over so fast. Darwin famously called their rapid appearance in the fossil record his abominable mystery.
He did. Fossils now suggest they showed up around 140 million years ago. So while it wasn't instantaneous, their diversification was incredibly rapid, and it lines up perfectly with the rise of their partners.
Animal pollinators.
The ultimate mutualism. The flower gives a reward nectar, pollen, and the animal gives precise, targeted delivery of genetic material. Research even shows that flowers with bilateral symmetry, where an insect has to land in a specific way.
They have much higher rates of speciation.
Exactly. That precision placement drives specialization and divergence like nothing else.
And today, we classify this huge kingdom into major groups, with the monocots and eudicots being the big ones.
Yeah, and you can tell them apart pretty easily. Monocots, like grasses and palms, have one seed leaf, or cotyledon. Eudicots, which are most of what you see, lagoons, roses, oaks have two.
It's easy to get lost in the biology here, but, I mean, the human welfare is completely dependent on these plants.
Completely. Our entire global food supply is built on angiosperms. Think about this fact. Just 6 crops, maize, rice, wheat, potatoes, cassava, and sweet potatoes, provide 80% of all calories consumed by humanity.
80% from 6 plants. And we didn't just find them, we engineered them through artificial selection.
Aggressively. The change from teosinte, that wild grass, to a modern ear of corn, it happened because of changes in just a handful of key mutations. We transformed them.
And beyond food, they give us materials like wood for construction, pulp for paper, and medicine. They are our pharmacy.
Our oldest one. A quarter of all prescription drugs in the U.S. have active ingredients that come directly from plants. Digitalin from foxglove for heart conditions, Taxol from the Pacific yew for cancer treatment, even aspirin's precursor, salicin, from willow bark.
When you lay all that out, food, housing, medicine, it makes the current rate of habitat destruction just terrifying.
It should be terrifying. We're losing about 63,000 square kilometers of tropical rainforest every single year. We are pushing maybe 50% of Earth's species towards extinction in the next couple of centuries. It is a non-renewable resource.
And we're not just losing the species we know about.
That's the real tragedy. We've only studied a tiny fraction, fewer than 5,000 species, for their medicinal potential. When we clear-cut a forest, we could be destroying the cure for a future disease before we even know it exists.
It's an incredible story. From this vulnerable ancestor to this hyper-efficient strategy built around a tiny, protected Gametophyte, a resilient seed, and then perfected by the magic of the flower and the fruit, they really did conquer the world.
And that knowledge isn't just academic. It reinforces the profound ethical need for conservation. We have to protect these ecosystems, especially the rainforests, before we lose this living library of solutions.
It does leave you with a thought. You know, if that specialization, that bilateral symmetry in flowers, accelerated diversification by ensuring the precise transfer of information, how does that apply to us, to our modern ecosystems of knowledge?
That's a fascinating application.
Are we selectively pollinating certain kinds of information while other forms, maybe less flashy, risk going extinct?
Something to think about.
Well, you are now thoroughly informed on the evolutionary brilliance that gave us the diverse plant kingdom we all rely on. We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive.